The blizzard had been merciless, turning the New Mexico territory into a white hell that swallowed horses and men alike. Jake Morrison's gelding had collapsed 3 miles back, its breath forming one last cloud before the cold claimed it. Now, stumbling through knee-deep snow with frostbite gnawing at his fingers, Jake spotted the warm glow of firelight through a cabin window, salvation carved from timber and hope. He knocked with what strength remained, his knuckles barely making sound against the wooden door. When it opened, Jake found himself staring into the most beautiful eyes he'd ever seen, dark as midnight, framed by long black hair that caught the firelight like silk. The young Navajo woman stepped back, her hand instinctively moving to the knife at her belt. "Please," Jake whispered, his voice cracked from cold and desperation. "I won't make it through the night." Behind the first woman appeared another, younger but bearing the same striking features. The sisters exchanged words in their native tongue, rapid and musical. Jake caught fragments. Bilagana, white man; Che, cold; Ina, life. The older sister, who couldn't have been more than 25, made the decision. "Come," she said in accented English, stepping aside. "You will die out there." Jake stumbled inside, immediately overwhelmed by the warmth and the scent of sage, burning in the hearth. The cabin was modest but comfortable, decorated with intricate weavings and pottery that spoke of deep cultural roots. The younger sister, perhaps 19, watched him with curious eyes as her older sibling guided him to a chair near the fire. "I'm Jake Morrison," he managed through chattering teeth. "I was heading to Santa Fe when the storm hit." "I am Ayana," the older sister replied, already moving to prepare hot broth. "This is my sister, Nayeli. You are far from any town. Bilagana." As feeling returned to his extremities, Jake studied his rescuers. Ayana moved with quiet confidence, her every gesture purposeful and graceful. She wore traditional dress, mixed with practical frontier clothing, a beautiful fusion of two worlds. Nayeli was more reserved, stealing glances at him while tending to her beadwork by the fire. "Your English is excellent," Jake observed, accepting the bowl of warm broth Ayana offered. "Our father traded with white settlers," Ayana explained, settling across from him. "He believed we should understand both worlds to survive in either." The storm raged outside, wind howling like angry spirits around the cabin's walls. Jake learned that the sisters lived alone since their parents' death from smallpox 2 winters prior. They survived by trading crafts and herbs with nearby settlements, maintaining their independence in a world that often showed little kindness to their people. As the night deepened, Jake found himself drawn into conversation with Ayana. She spoke of her people's connection to the land, of ceremonies that honored the changing seasons, of a way of life that seemed both ancient and eternal. Her voice carried the weight of wisdom beyond her years, shaped by loss but not broken by it. Nayeli eventually retired to the back room, but not before Jake caught her shy smile. Ayana remained, mending one of Jake's torn shirts by firelight. The domestic intimacy of the moment struck him. Here was peace he'd never known in his wandering life. "Why do you travel alone?" Ayana asked, her needle catching the light. Jake stared into the flames, seeing ghosts of his past. Sometimes a man has to keep moving to stay ahead of his mistakes. Outside, the wind began to die, but neither Jake nor Ayana seemed eager for dawn to break their fragile sanctuary. Dawn painted the snow-covered landscape in shades of rose and gold, transforming the previous night's hellscape into something almost beautiful. Jake woke on the floor near the dying fire, wrapped in blankets that smelled of sage and something uniquely feminine. Ayana was already awake, preparing corn cakes on a flat stone over the coals. "The storm has passed," she said without looking up, though Jake sensed she'd been watching him sleep. "You can continue to Santa Fe." But Jake found himself reluctant to leave. Over breakfast, he learned more about the sisters' precarious situation. White settlers had been pressuring local tribes to sell their land, and tensions were rising. Some Navajo had already been forced onto reservations, while others, like Ayanna and Nayeli, clung to their ancestral homes with quiet desperation. "It's not safe for you here alone," Jake said, surprising himself with the protectiveness in his voice. Ayanna's eyes flashed. "We have survived without the help of white men before." "I didn't mean," Jake began, but Nayeli's gentle touch on her sister's arm stopped the brewing argument. "He speaks from concern, sister," Nayeli said softly. It was the first time Jake had heard her voice clearly, melodic and warm. "Perhaps we should listen." The tension eased, but Jake could see the pride and pain warring in Ayanna's expression. These women had learned to be strong because they'd had no choice, and his offer of protection, however well-intentioned, reminded them of their vulnerability. As the day progressed, Jake found reasons to delay his departure. He repaired a loose shutter, chopped firewood, and helped Nayeli tend to her small garden behind the cabin. With each task, he felt more connected to this place, to these remarkable women who had shown him kindness when they had every reason to be suspicious. Ayanna watched his efforts with growing confusion. "Why do you stay? What do you want from us?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Jake set down his axe and met her gaze directly. "I want to help. I want to—" He struggled for words. "I want to belong somewhere." Something shifted in Ayanna's expression, a crack in her carefully maintained armor. "Belonging is not something that can be taken, Biligana. It must be earned." "Then let me try to earn it." That evening, as they shared another meal by the fire, Jake told them about his past. He'd been a soldier in the war, had seen too much death and destruction. Afterward, he'd drifted from town to town, working as a ranch hand, sometimes as a lawman, never staying long enough to form real connections. The loneliness had become a constant companion, as familiar as his own shadow. "And what of family?" Nayeli asked gently. "Lost my parents to fever when I was 16, never married, never had children." Jake's voice grew quiet. "Never found anyone who could see past the ghosts I carry." Ayanna studied him in the firelight, her expression unreadable. Ghosts can be powerful medicine if you know how to honor them instead of running from them. Later, as Nayeli slept, Jake and Ayanna sat in comfortable silence. The attraction between them had been growing all day, in stolen glances, in the way her hand lingered when she passed him food, in the protective instincts he couldn't suppress. But Jake also sensed Nayeli's quiet interest, the way she blushed when he smiled at her, the careful attention she paid to his words. "Your sister is very kind," Jake said carefully. "Nayeli has a gentle heart," Ayanna agreed. "Perhaps too gentle for this harsh world. And you? What kind of heart do you have?" Ayanna was quiet for so long, Jake thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke. "A heart that has learned to be careful with its trust." Before Jake could respond, the sound of approaching horses shattered the night's peace. Many horses, moving with purpose through the snow. Ayanna was on her feet instantly, her hand on her knife. "Hide," she whispered urgently. "Now." But it was too late. The riders had already surrounded the cabin, and a commanding voice called out in Navajo. Jake saw fear flash across Ayanna's face, the first time she'd shown such vulnerability. "What is it?" he asked. "My uncle," she whispered. "The war chief. He has come for us." The knock came at dawn, measured and authoritative. Jake had spent the night hidden in the root cellar beneath the cabin floor, listening to the sounds of the war party making camp outside. Through the wooden slats, he'd heard Ayanna and Nayeli speaking in hushed, urgent tones with their uncle. Chief Haston Begay. Now, as morning light filtered through the cabin windows, the chief stood in the doorway, a man of perhaps 50 winters, his weathered face bearing the weight of leadership and the scars of countless battles with encroaching settlers. His presence filled the small space with an almost tangible authority. "Uncle," Ayanna said, her voice carefully controlled. "You honor us with your visit." Chief Begay's dark eyes swept the cabin, taking in details that spoke of recent male presence, the extra firewood, the repaired shutter, the faint scent of tobacco that wasn't from the sisters' pipes. His gaze settled on a pair of boots by the door that were clearly too large for either woman. "Where is he?" the chief asked in English, his accent thick but his meaning clear. Ayanna lifted her chin defiantly. "I don't know what you mean." "The Bilagana who sheltered here during the war. Storm. My scouts tracked him to your door." The chief stepped further inside, his hand resting casually on the tomahawk at his belt. "Do not insult my intelligence, niece." Jake made his decision. Pushing up the cellar door, he emerged with his hands visible and empty. "I'm here, Chief. These women gave me shelter when I would have died in the cold. Any anger you have should be directed at me." Chief Begay studied Jake with the intensity of a hawk evaluating prey. "You are the one called Morrison, the lawman from Tucson." Jake's blood chilled. His reputation had preceded him, and not in a good way. "Former lawman. I'm just a drifter now. A drifter who killed 3 men in Tucson. A drifter who carries the scent of violence wherever he goes." The chief's voice carried the weight of judgment. "And now you bring that violence to my family." "Uncle, please." Nayeli spoke for the first time, her voice trembling. "He meant no harm. He was dying in the storm." "Silence, child." The chief's tone brooked no argument. "You do not understand the danger you have invited into your home." Ayanna stepped protectively in front of Jake. "He has done nothing wrong. Here, he helped us, worked for his shelter. By our laws of hospitality." "Our laws?" Chief Begay's voice rose. "Our laws are being trampled by white soldiers who burn our homes and drive our people onto reservations. Our laws mean nothing when they come with guns and treaties written in lies." The chief began to pace, his agitation growing. "Even now the army searches for this man. They believe he has information about stolen army payroll, when they do not. Find him in the towns. They will come here, to our lands. They will use his presence as an excuse to drive us from our homes." Jake felt the weight of his past crushing down on him. The stolen payroll? He'd been investigating the theft when he'd been forced to kill those men in self-defense. But the army didn't see it that way. They saw a lawman gone rogue, possibly in league with the thieves. "I'll leave," Jake said quietly. "Right now. I'll draw them away from here." "It is too late for that," Chief Begay replied. "They are already coming. My scouts report a cavalry unit 2 days behind you following your trail." The cabin fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Jake could see the fear in Nayeli's eyes, the anger in Ayanna's, and the terrible burden of leadership in the chief's weathered face. "There is only one way to protect my people," the chief continued. "One way to show the army that we are not harboring fugitives, that we remain loyal to the treaties we have signed." "Uncle, no," Ayanna whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. "I must turn him over to the soldiers when they arrive. It is the only way to keep our people safe." Jake nodded slowly. He'd known this moment would come eventually. The past always caught up with men like him. "I understand. I won't resist." But Ayanna stepped forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I will not allow it. This man saved our lives by his presence." "We owe him protection. You owe him nothing," the chief thundered, You owe your people everything. Would you see our children driven from their homes for the sake of one white man? Would you see honor driven from our hearts for the sake of fear? Ayanna shot back. The chief's hand moved to his tomahawk, and for a moment Jake thought the man might strike his own niece. Instead, Chief Begay closed his eyes and took a deep breath, visibly struggling with his decision. When he opened his eyes again, they held a terrible resolve. There is another way, an old way, from the time before the white man's laws ruled our land. He looked directly at Jake, then at his nieces. You will marry one of my nieces. Tonight. By our laws, this will make you family, and family we protect. Even unto death. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake stared at the chief, hardly believing what he'd heard. Ayanna and Nayeli looked equally stunned. Choose, the chief continued relentlessly. Ayanna or Nayeli. Become family or become sacrifice. But choose quickly. The soldiers will be here by tomorrow's sunset. The weight of the chief's ultimatum settled over the cabin like a shroud. Jake stared at the two sisters, his heart torn between impossible choices. Ayanna stood rigid with defiance, her dark eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and something deeper, something that spoke of feelings she'd been fighting since the moment he'd stumbled through their door. Nayeli, gentler but no less strong, watched him with quiet understanding, as if she could see the war raging in his soul. This is madness, Ayanna said, breaking the suffocating silence. Uncle, you cannot force such a choice. Marriage is sacred, not a tool for political survival. Chief Begay's expression remained implacable. Everything is political now, niece. The white man's world has made it so. Would you prefer I choose for you? Or perhaps you would rather watch this man hang while our people are driven onto the reservation? Jake found his voice at last. I won't be the cause of anyone's forced marriage. There has to be another way. There is no other way, the chief replied firmly. The soldiers will arrive tomorrow. They will demand justice for the men you killed, and they will use any excuse to claim our lands. But if you are family, if you are bound to us by marriage, then we have the right to protect you under tribal law. The territorial governor will not risk war over one man, even a wanted one. Nayeli stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. And if we refuse? If neither of us agrees to this marriage? Her uncle's face softened slightly as he looked at his younger niece. Then I will be forced to bind him and deliver him to the soldiers, myself. It will break my heart, but I will not see our people suffer for one man's troubles. The morning stretched into afternoon as the impossible decision hung over them. Jake chopped wood with desperate energy, trying to think of alternatives. That didn't exist. Ayanna paced like a caged wolf, her anger radiating from her in waves. Only Nayeli seemed calm, sitting by the fire and working on her beadwork with steady hands. As evening approached, Jake made his choice. Or rather, his heart made it for him. Ayanna, he said quietly, finding her standing at the window watching. The sunset paint the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and crimson. I need to tell you something. She turned to face him, her expression guarded. If you're going to ask me to marry you to save your life, save your breath, I'm going to ask you to marry me because I love you. The words hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. Ayanna's carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing the vulnerability beneath. You don't know me, she whispered. You've known me for 3 days. I've known you. My whole life, Jake replied, stepping closer. I just didn't know I was looking for you until I found you. You're strong and proud and beautiful, and you see the world with eyes that don't flinch from hard truths. You saved my life, not just from the storm, but from the emptiness I've been carrying. Tears gathered in Ayanna's eyes, but she blinked them back. And Nayeli? She cares for you too. I've seen how she looks at you. Jake glanced toward the fire where Nayeli sat, seemingly absorbed in her work but undoubtedly listening to every word. Nayeli is wonderful. In another life, another time perhaps. But it's you who owns my heart, Ayanna. It's been you from the moment you opened that door. Before Ayanna could respond, Nayeli rose from her place by the fire and approached them. Her face was serene, but Jake could see the pain she was trying to hide. "Sister," Nayeli said gently, taking Ayanna's hands in hers, "I have watched you fight against your feelings for this man since he arrived. I have also watched him fight against his feelings for you. Love is a gift from the spirits, not a burden to be carried in silence." "Nayeli," Ayanna began, but her sister continued, "I care for Jake, yes. But I am young, and my heart is not yet fully awakened. Yours is, and it calls to his. I will not stand in the way of such a calling." Chief Begay, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the cabin. "Then it is decided. The ceremony will take place at sunset. I will perform the rites myself." As the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Jake and Ayanna stood before Chief Begay in the small cabin. Nayeli had woven flowers into her sister's hair and draped her in a beautiful blanket that had belonged to their grandmother. Jake wore his cleanest shirt and the turquoise bracelet Nayeli had quietly pressed into his hand, a wedding gift from the sister who loved him enough to let him go. The ceremony was simple but profound, conducted in both Navajo and English. They exchanged vows that spoke of partnership, respect, and protection. When Chief Begay pronounced them husband and wife, Jake felt something shift inside him, a sense of belonging he'd never experienced before. The soldiers arrived the next morning just as the chief had predicted. But when they demanded to search the cabin for the fugitive Jake Morrison, they found instead a Navajo family, a man who had married into the tribe and was therefore under their protection. The captain, frustrated but unwilling to risk an incident that could spark wider conflict, departed with warnings and threats, but no prisoner. As the dust of their departure settled, Jake stood with his arm around his new wife, watching the riders disappear into the distance. Nayeli stood beside them, her hand resting gently on Jake's shoulder, not with possessiveness, but with the affection of a sister welcoming a new brother into the family. "So," Ayanna said, leaning into Jake's embrace, "what now, husband?" Jake looked out at the vast landscape that was now his home, at the family that had accepted him despite everything, at the woman who had chosen to bind her life to his. For the first time in years, the future held promise instead of just survival. "Now we build a life together," he said simply. "All of us." And in the growing light of a new day, that seemed like the most beautiful adventure of all.